If we take the essential elements of the state, Aventuri can be a state. According to Kelsen's state theory, the essential elements that a state needs to be considered like one is territory, population, government, and laws. The territory is the land where his influence can rule the population or the people that live in the territory, except for people like tourists. The government are the public servers that rule the territory and the population. And for last, the laws are the normative that recognize the rights of the population, give the composition to the government, and establish the obligation to the public servers. So, in this context, the territory of Aventuri will be the platform of the island, the population, even 10 people that can be considered a population. Government, Aventuri is ruled by Angel Avento as his monarch. For the last, the state must be ruled by some laws. Aventuri has its own constitution and has a passport, and we can suppose a migration protocol for the tourists. So yeah, Aventuri in base can be a state.
First, let's make the assumption that Aventuri already has a defined territory, it has a permanent population, and a government. They succeeded in the first step to become a country. Subsequently, it is important to take into account the geographic region. Aventuri, the small concrete island Angel Avento occupied for Aventuri, was 8 nautical miles in international waters off the coasts of Agrosia. So, in terms of the geographic region, Aventuri is not part of Agrosia. Also, it is important to mention the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea that stipulates to consider a country that their territory is next to a shore or the sea territory cannot be superior than 12 nautical miles. When it surpasses these 12 nautical miles, they are considered international waters. It does not apply to Aventuri because Avento occupied the small concrete island and founded Aventuri in 1960, before the 1982 provision in the aforementioned convention. And the main impediment that, according to Joshua Keating, a former associate editor at Foreign Policy in How to Start Your Own Country in 4 Easy Steps, pointed out like the most important thing to take into account. Other countries must acknowledge your existence as a country. In any different case, you will not be considered as a country. So, the free and sovereign principality of Aventuri hadn't been recognized as a country.
If we strictly adhere to international regulations, particularly the ILO Convention 169 on indigenous and tribal peoples in independent countries, there is no provision that supports a cause for independence. In this context, it is essential to analyze the rights of indigenous communities and their limitations to address this question. In this regard, Article 2 of the aforementioned legal framework outlines the role of governments and the communities living within their territories. This role emphasizes the participation of the affected peoples, requiring coordinated and systematic actions aimed at protecting their rights and ensuring respect for their integrity. Viewed from another perspective, the goal of respecting indigenous communities is not to foster their independence, but to promote their integration within the state of which they are a part. This integration must honor rights such as autonomy, respect for their customs and practices, prior consultation before undertaking actions that affect them, and the right to determine their own organization, among other rights. However, none of these rights are intended to enable independence from the state. Rather, they allow for integration in a matter of their choosing, even if that includes a degree of autonomy. Yet, they will always remain citizens of the state in which they reside. Therefore, the answer is no. Baku cannot be independent.
The right to self-determination, while central to the concept of freedom from subjugation, does not automatically imply the right to unilateral succession and the formation of a new state. Article 1 of the UN Charter recognizes this right as a principle of international law, as reaffirmed in the 1996 General Recommendation of the UN Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Its scope, however, can be interpreted in two ways. Either as internal self-determination concerning the political, economic, social, and cultural entitlements that exist within an established state, which may be exercised without outside interference, or as external self-determination, which addresses the possibility of choosing an international status, such as independent, integrated, or associated with another state. but it remains unclear whether it extends beyond a colonial context. Now, an emblematic and sui generis case of this nature is Kosovo, whose independence and the right to secede from Serbia were recognized by most UN member states, mainly on the grounds of the systematic discrimination against the Kosovan minority. Still, in the advisory opinion issued by the International Court of Justice on this case, there was no ruling on whether the right to self-determination conferred a positive entitlement, even on entities within states, to unilaterally declare their independence. In this sense, given the lack of international consensus on whether self-determination alone grants the right to claim independence, the Baku, an indigenous people originating from the state of Croatia, would most likely need proof of colonial-like domination to claim and be internationally recognized as independent under this right, so as to not be deemed contradictory to international law, particularly in matters of integrity of state sovereignty.